Welcome to Global Express. This is our weekly interaction with experts where we analyze the impact of developments in our backyard, on our neighborhood, on India. Do click on the new Indian Express website and tweet and follow Global Express. Talking us through a very interesting time in international relations as the United States and India's hegemony is challenged in its old hunting grounds is an international security and geopolitical analyst and strategic advisor from Sri Lanka. Asanga Abeyagoonasekera is the present executive director of the South Asia Foresight Network under the Millennium Project in Washington, D.C. He's also a senior fellow at the Millennium Project and technical advisor to the International Monetary Foundation. He's led 2 government think tanks. He's served as the executive director at Lakshman Kadirgamar's Institute of International and Relations and Strategic Studies. It's his recent book, though, Teardrop Diplomacy, that has a China-Sri Lanka foray, which has, I think, shaken up the India and Sri Lanka in a very big way. Welcome, Asanga. Honored to have you on the show.
Thank you, Nina.
The most worrying aspect in your research papers so far isn't just the manner in which China is playing Sri Lanka off against India. It's the fact that it's using oodles of cash, you say, to buy off key officials and members of the Sri Lankan, hierarchies. But let's begin with what happened in November, on November 20th, 2023, when the special envoy of Chinese President Xi Jinping, State Councillor Shen Yiqing, said China is prioritizing the extension of the corridor, the China-Myanmar economic corridor to the island nation. President Wickremesinghe accepted this proposal. How do you read this? Can you explain what and how the China-Myanmar corridor is? And given the turmoil in Myanmar itself between the army and the people, is it even a feasible project?
Well, thank you, Nina, for having me. You're starting with a very important question here on geopolitics, actually. How does a corridor, an economic corridor, the China-Myanmar economic corridor, connects to an island nation? China, with my work that I've done for the last several years on China, China doesn't like even the word geopolitics. Even in my last visit to Beijing at the Belt and Road Forum, they don't like the word geopolitics. They don't use the word geopolitics. But connecting a corridor to an island is clearly geopolitics. It's an ocean sphere because we are an island nation, and Myanmar is. Why would they do it now? The question is, why would Wickremesinghe accept this proposal when the special envoy suggests this? So what is the reason they're proposing now? The reason is very clear. Sri Lanka is a very fragile state. Actually, if you look at the FSI index, the failed state index 2023, both the countries, Myanmar and Sri Lanka, is having a significant risk economically, politically. And if you look at the external intervention pillar on the FSI report, we are at a very high mark. And both countries have dramatically changed from 2022 to 23. So China is exploiting nations like FSI. If you look at the FSI index, that most of the failed states or who are prone to fail, they're exploiting this environment. So this is a warning that needs to be seen. They're doing it at this particular moment because Sri Lankan government requires debt restructuring, which China agreed to restructure last month, a few days before the Belt and Road Forum. But they have not spelled what are the conditions, no one knows what are the conditions is. And one of the senior officials I met in Colombo last month clearly expressed there is a significant danger coming from China. Has to be understood. One is on this dimension of playing geopolitics in the island, connecting corridors with, basically, and Hambantota to Myanmar. As you know, the Hambantota port has become, there is a hybrid operation from the spy ship visits to the research ship which
We'll
came.
get that in a moment. But can you tell us why President Ranil Wickremesinghe, who long seen as leaning towards India, has shifted? Because as we begin the new year, 2024, is there a shift? Is there a discernible shift in Sri Lanka's stance towards India? I mean, you've yourself written about how Wickremesinghe has criticized the Indo-Pacific. He's criticized AUKUS. He's even brought up Western human rights hypocrisy. So is there a shift in Wickremesinghe's liberal policies? I mean, is he borrowing a leaf from his predecessors, from the, the Rajapaksas, playing India off against China? And now the added danger of the Maldives government also seeing to do a tilt, a real China tilt.
No, clearly you see a shift from Wickremesinghe policies. If you have studied the Wickremesinghe very carefully during his time when he was prime minister, the several times when he was prime minister, he was more liberal. He was talking on the Indo-Pacific. He was talking about human rights issues. So there's a gradual shift when he became the president. And so towards the end of his sort of 2023, the last quarter, starting from New York, where he clearly mentioned that Indo-Pacific is an artificial construct and AUKUS is targeted towards China, and this shouldn't happen. So you see a dramatic shift, and then speaking on the human rights on the German TV and saying that there's Western hypocrisy and all that. So you see a dramatic shift in his policies and a kind of a tilt that I see towards China, while welcoming, the corridors, while accepting, Chinese proposals. So you see, I see a clear shift in Wickremesinghe. This shift is because of, I think, two reasons. One is because the parliament is fully controlled by Rajapaksas, and Rajapaksas they are basically talking on, their, policies of ultranationalism, which Wickremesinghe is speaking for the first time.
So you mean to say that he's taking off where the Gotabaya Rajapaksa left off? Because I thought that it was a ploy to to sort of fob off China to begin with. When Ranil actually visited India, he made a state visit to India where he actually signed on. I think was it in 2023 itself? He had an agreement with India.
I think, yes, initially he did commit in Delhi, which was seen he was saying he will commit for a rules-based order. He would he would look at India's security as a serious concern. He would, because of the spy ship visits and all that. But look what happened. Last month was a clear example. There were several warnings from New Delhi on the ship visit, research ship visit, which is very clear to the military in Sri Lanka.
The Shiyan 6 is what you call it, is what it was called.
Correct.
And,
yes,
and
that's
last
a very good
year,
example.
And last year was Yang Wang 5, which docked at Hambantota.
Correct. So both the ships, there was a serious issue from Delhi raised on these ships because they are hybrid nature. They come for research, but they have a military component in it, which is hydrographic surveys for submarine warfare, very clearly. And this has been multiple warnings coming from Delhi to Colombo. But then Colombo has been sensitive at the beginning. Okay, we will look at it very carefully, but then eventually given docking rights. And both the ships have been docked. And not only docking, but they have also signed an agreement with the research agency, which is the National Aquatic Research Agency, NARA.
Yes. Tell us more about that, because you're talking about the National Aquatics Research Center allowing the mapping of the ocean, when the Indian Navy, I know for a fact, talking to several Indian naval officers, that they've done a mapping of the Indian Ocean several years ago. They know it down to every coral and every stone and every nook.
No, there is no aquatic research going on here, clearly, Nina. So, one has to understand what China is, the strategy that they are deploying. I think your Foreign Secretary Vijay Gokhale was absolutely right when he mentioned on the East Asia. He has written a really good piece on Kra Canal.
I saw that.
Yeah, and also talking about Hambantota and Kwakpo. So I fully agree with him. This is the sort of a strategy you need to understand, and Colombo needs to understand. So, but unfortunately, Colombo is sort of taken a very passive stance, and we have been kind of trapped with the Chinese. I mean, Wickremesinghe, I saw like at the beginning that he would navigate the foreign policy well because of his experience as prime minister. But what has happened right now is a serious danger. And he's gone into a significant tilt, and that tilt would impact the regional security. And Nara,
So he's basically following where Gota was leading also, because Gota also visited India and he also promised a kind of a pact with India and then chose to go with China. Why is it that both leaders have done, literally the same thing? What is it that China offers, in the immediate that India has not?
So I think the influence that I captured in my book, mainly the strategic, the trap that I call it. So the one of the main points for the strategic trap is the massive amounts of funding that they give. So when it comes to some of the interviews I did last month in Colombo, was also about the elite capture, the political elite capture, and how well they're doing. It's actually a political warfare. I mean, if you go in depth how political warfare is carried out in Sri Lanka by China, they've been very successful. So individually targeting, supporting policies of Chinese policies. So all of them, like you correctly mentioned, not only in Gotabaya, but even the previous president, you start with a very good Indian, pro-Indian stance. And then why would they sort of, move into this pro-Chinese? So the gradual transition is because of successful political warfare carried out in Sri Lanka.
No, but can you elaborate on what you mean by political warfare? But does that mean that they are targeting susceptible politicians with sort of with some goodies that like in Hambantota clearly is work to the Rajapaksa's benefit in many ways, not the countries,
Correct.
so to speak.
Correct. So the CCP maneuvers in getting into the political parties and funding political parties has been sort of, there's been a rise in that. And I have captured this in my CSEP paper chapter that I've authored. So it is a detailed description how CCP gets involved in the Rajapaksa's political party, and especially on Rajapaksa's political party, how the funding has been done and how the narrative has been created. And if you look at the misinformation that they give on, creating that sort of new economic model than the democratic model that we have, the political model. So there is an alteration that these leaders face. The alteration or the shift, a gradual shift from the democratic model towards a more ultra-nationalist, as well as, talking about the sovereignty much more. And then and introducing a different model. And even Gotabaya goes on to the extent saying that we need to introduce the Chinese development model to the rural areas. So Wickremesinghe is also talking about, connecting corridors, connecting, Sri Lanka towards BRI. And if you look at his statements in Beijing, it's a clear warning. Basically, again, this is the Rajapaksa, policy that foreign policy that he is implementing. So the political warfare comes into infiltrating or like funding political parties, misinformation carried out, the intelligence operations that has been, and also towards the military and security. So all the areas China has been very successful. They have won all the Sri Lankan projects. They have not lost a single project in Sri Lanka. That's what my book captures. So I think
what about Asanga? What about projects like the Colombo Port Terminal, the Trincomalee Harbour, the KKS?
Yes. Well, Colombo Port. I mean, as you know, was shifted, from the west container, east container terminal to the west container terminal, and because the protesters were, against the project back then during because in the previous regime, where the tripartite agreement we were not allowed to carry. But then Adani as well as the the US have come up with the present as proposal. But then definitely you see some sort of all these projects going on in KKS as well as in Trincomalee. But then China, if you look at it, is footprint of China is much larger. At the eastern province, the fisheries industry, what they're doing, I mean, the Chinese footprint is so large. I mean, we have the data.
So basically, India hasn't moved fast enough. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, definitely. It's very clear. In my data, it says that, India has not, I mean, what China has done in Sri Lanka in terms of political warfare, as well as what's happening in terms infrastructure, in power, in telecommunication, 80% of the telecommunications operate by Huawei. The backbone.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Huawei. Yeah.
Yeah, so Wickremesinghe last month signed another MOU with Huawei. So saying that Huawei assistance is required for digital infrastructure, digital payments and all that. So while he does the same thing with India a few months ago on the digital payments and, we require all that. So you see Wickremesinghe, I mean, he's been in politics for the last 4 decades. So cleverly sort of sort of hedging both, but then I don't see the hedging anymore, because you connect corridors to Sri Lanka is a huge issue. Kouapho and Hambantota, this is, I mean, China is exploiting that fragility of the country, like I said in the beginning.
That's a very important point. And China is also modernizing its air force and its navy. You say you've written about that too. How fast is that going? I mean, is that this modernizing of China's armed forces? I mean, its air force, its navy. I mean, you're talking about this. That is a huge threat, also, isn't it? I mean, the sense, could they intimidate Sri Lanka through warfare, or will it be through its debt diplomacy?
Well, if you look at 2 reports, which we have analyzed very carefully, which is the RAND data captured on Chinese military bases, as well as the aid data. So both reports, we have done a thorough analysis, and we found that the next military base is going to be in the East Asia, very closer to India, as well as so it's a clear what we see is a clear projection of what China is trying to do. But have we been enough to counter that? Indo-Pacific or the strategies that we have, no, we have not been enough to counter basically in the domestic arena. So it has to happen in the domestic arena. What happened in Maldives can happen to many countries. So Maldives campaign was a clear political warfare carried out by
India
out. India out. I mean, definitely. Yeah. So you will have Wickremesinghe knows his elections are coming up in September.
Yeah.
So he is developing this strategy, and this is a clear danger for people. I mean, the countries who adhere to a rules-based order, adhere to democratic norms. I think India would need to understand sort of this sort of danger that's coming in, and PLA will not the research vessels that's coming. There's going to be another vessel. It's going to come apparently to Sri Lanka. So all these research vessels. Yeah. So the research. Yeah, so when I was in Colombo, I got that information. So it's not going to stop.
So you think this is going to, is there going to be an India out campaign, do you think, in the forthcoming Sri Lankan elections as well?
They already started, Nina. They already started at the grassroots level. They have, I know, because they're starting with the ultra-nationalist movement, like Gotabaya Rajapaksa. So same sort of, you need the security threat from all these, Indo-Pacific, all these. So they already started it. So even the crisis, as well as the people's uprising, there's a book written by a parliamentarian saying that the uprising was done by India. So Yeah, so it's all
As in the
disinformation.
as in the
Started.
Easter Sunday massacre, that one.
That's another one. So all these reports are, you can see those misinformation, disinformation going into
Yeah.
these society. But I see a clear trajectory that we are heading just like Maldives in that direction. If it goes on like this, because what happened was installing Wickremesinghe, if you look at it from the initial stage, of course, everybody supported Wickremesinghe because of his experience, a person who can stabilize. And IMF walked in and they did the stabilization amazingly. If you look at the diagnostic report, which they did, first time in Asia, was one of
The
the
International
key
Monetary Fund
reports.
diagnostic report.
Yeah, out
on
of the
which you were a
130,
technical
yeah,
advisor.
correct. Out of the 138 pages, Nina, if you look at 100 pages are about corruption. It's about corruption in the country. And is China, I mean, if you look at it, the corruption in Sri Lanka, where did the corruption come from? From the elites as well as the political elites. Of course, China was a partner in all these massive infrastructure projects. So you can't exclude China. I mean, China is not the only factor for the fall of the economy, but China is a significant factor. So that needs to be understood, as well as the high level of corruption. You need sort of some sort of government.
What are the remedial measures going forward? What would you suggest? I mean, should there be a more public debate on this subject? Because it doesn't seem to be a factor in any of the newspapers or the media or anything like that. There is no sound, not a little peep even against China's debt diplomacy, debt trap, basically.
Debt trap or strategic trap, nothing. I mean, if you look at it, ones who are sort of looking at it in a critical manner, or the think tanks, or unfortunately, it's not coming from. And what's coming out is from outside Sri Lanka. So within Sri Lanka, the public perception, I mean, we captured the public perception of Chinese projects. And it's very clear. I mean, how people are angry. There's no jobs created from the port city, that large, massive project they did for last 6 years. There's nothing. There is
because they brought in
Airport,
Chinese workers. They brought in Chinese workers rather than hire the
point,
local workers.
yes. Yeah, and because they had a massive hoarding in front of the project saying 100,000 jobs will be created to the Sri Lankan people. Where are jobs? So all these, I think like you rightly said, there's nothing coming in from the country, unfortunately, pointing sort of, there are a few people who are saying, talking about it, but that's not good enough. If you look at the justice minister who was there, the previous justice minister, he mentioned that this is colonization. He mentioned this colonization, the port, referring to the port city. But now he's a minister in the cabinet of the Wickremesinghe. He's not talking any word about it. So you see
so everyone's been asked to zip it.
Yeah, so there's a shift in what they talk also. I mean, I quoted him in one of my pieces on when he said about the colonization, when he raised those legal issues. So as a justice minister, so right now the justice minister has changed his position. So you see all those changes that's going on.
So what do you see happening in the next couple of months as the new year dawns? Will India, you think, understand that it's lost its footing in the Maldives and is likely to do the same in Sri Lanka? I mean, it's like going back to square one. Do you expect a stepped up effort, or do you think it's just going to let it slide?
Well, I mean, country requires stability, but does not require this model. This is a different model China is installing. So I think New Delhi needs to understand the danger of it, as well as talking about this India's immediate periphery here. I mean, are you allowing China to sort of capture these places I mean, connecting corridors? Okay, developing a port is a different story, but connecting corridors, then China refused to say it's even geopolitics. It's not geopolitics. So what you see is a huge danger to India's internal security.
That's right.
If India, I mean, let it sort of all these countries to move into that Chinese sphere of influence, what happens to India's security? So that's why I agree with Vijay Gokhale. I mean, he sees this very clearly, the danger. And this needs to go to the strategic thinkers of Delhi as well as in Colombo. And Colombo needs guidance. Colombo needs help immediately to recalibrate the foreign policy, as well as what I see next year is elections. But elections require, some sort of assistance there too, because you need democratic elections. You cannot have political warfare carried out. You can't have political funding going into political parties. One of the senior officers I spoke in Colombo, very senior officers, and he mentioned that he even mentioned a few names of certain politicians that who have been funded by Chinese embassy to promote Chinese policies, even the ship visit. So
Wow.
this is targeted. This is targeted attempts. So this needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Asanga, for your extremely insightful comments on Sri Lanka and its impact on India and the almost, I feel, inevitable confrontation with China in 2024. Thank you, viewers, for watching Global Express. Please click on the New Indian Express and the Global Express icon and watch and share on Facebook and Twitter and social media.